Welcome to episode 200 of Elden Lore. The series has been trucking along for 3 years now, and I've enjoyed every minute of exploring the worlds of Elden Ring and Elden Ring Night Rain. Many have said in the comments over the years that I would eventually run out of material for this series, but I've managed to prove them wrong time and again. This world's story and lore is so rich and expansive that I believe even now I could still dive into theories and symbolism for some time to come. However, when it comes to my explorations of specific characters and monsters, the well is running a bit dry. With that in mind, I wanted to use episode 200 to talk about something many consider to be a solved mystery, but I believe has been hand-waved a bit too easily. Today, we are going to take a look at the Teardrop Scarabs, and I'm going to explain why I believe they have no connection to Gideon Ofnir whatsoever. Thanks for visiting Square Table Gaming, where we bring you the lore of Elden Ring and Night Rain every week. This week, we're sponsoring ourselves again by asking you to check out our Patreon. With YouTube's algorithm being in shambles, it's getting harder to sustain the channel on just ad revenue. So if you've enjoyed our lore dives, or just use us to fall asleep, please consider joining. Much like our memberships on YouTube, we're offering early access to our content, but at additional tiers, we've got new perks like behind-the-scenes looks at our editing process, access to the scripts of all of our videos, and ad-free content. If you want to support the channel and enjoy our entire library ad-free, please consider signing up for the STG Patreon. With that said, let's get back to the Scarabs. The Teardrop Scarabs roam every inch of the lands between, from Limgrave to the mountaintops of giants, gathering their balls of gold and filth. According to the gold and silver scarab talismans, these creatures are the carriers of treasures and precious things. We see the truth in these statements if we're quick enough to defeat one, as they'll drop ashes of war, smithing stones, incantations, and refills for our flask of Crimson Tears. These industrious little bugs carry some of the most precious items to be found in these golden lands, and they don't seem to have an aggressive bone in their insectoid bodies. These dung beetles simply move from place to place, gathering whatever trinkets they find on the ground, rolling their balls so they can feed on them later. There are 5 kinds of scarabs we can encounter during our travels, coming in different colors: black, white, red, blue, and gold. Each beetle holds a ball with a prize related to its respective color, with the black beetles holding ashes of war, the white, somber smithing stones, the red, a refill of our HP flasks, the blue, a refill of our FP, and the gold, incantations. These creatures also have variations with different abilities such as teleporting, turning invisible, growing to an outrageous size, and flying. All of these scarabs of various colors, size, and abilities seem aimless, as if they have no true goal. They just live and survive in this land with there being nothing else to them really. However, for a long time now there's been a prevalent theory that their wanderings are not without purpose. That every beetle we encounter works under a master who has them rolling up the secrets of the lands between for his benefit. Due to the various scarabs having some kind of marking on their shells that resemble an eye, many believe they are the direct servants of Gideon Ofnir, the All-Knowing, and that they roll their balls to bring him secrets. But I will say that this theory has never sat right with me for a number of reasons. It seems as though the main connection between the scarabs and Gideon is their eye motif. These creatures have no real written lore about them whatsoever aside from what kind of items they like to roll up based on their color. And the connection between Gideon and eyes is doing a lot of heavy lifting. I can understand why you'd make that association based on Gideon's all-knowing motif, but it's important to remember that he's not only represented by eyes, but ears as well. Also, if we take a closer look at the various scarabs, we can see that not every variation of this creature actually does have an eye on their shell. Yes, there is an eye pattern on the Ash of War, Incantation, and Glintstone scarabs, but the Crimson and Cerulean Tear scarabs have a different symbol shown on their shells. On top of this, the white glowing scarabs have a different eye on them than the others, showing that while there is some consistency here, it's not across the board. All this aside, I think the most important detail to remember that invalidates this theory is the very eye symbol it's based on: Gideon's. The all-knowing symbol is essentially 5 eyes, 1 in the middle, 3 on top, and 1 below, all surrounded by a very ornate design. These eyes look nothing like the eyes on the Teardrop Scarabs, nor do the Scarab's eyes match any of the eye designs on Gideon's armor. I understand why, with nothing else to go on, we may default to the idea that these creatures serve Gideon. They gather lost knowledge and have eyes on their shell, while Gideon himself also gathers lost knowledge and adorns himself with eyes. But with Shadow of the Erdtree, we have another glaring detail that, in my estimation, makes it impossible for these creatures to be serving Gideon. The Teardrop Scarabs are also found in the Land of Shadow. While Elden Ring's timeline is often hard to parse, I have made some assumptions of my own based on the lore of Messmer the Impaler. He seems to have been around in the Lands Between when Radahn was young, and I think we can assume he left on his crusade sometime well before the Shattering, but after the Tarnished were banished from the Lands Between. If we consider this, I think it's fair to assume that Gideon Ofnir, if he was alive at the time, was nowhere to be seen when the Land of Shadow was locked away. If this were the case, I sincerely doubt he would have left behind the Teardrop Scarabs to gather the ruins of the Lands Between, so that he might learn its history, primarily because that history was still being written. The Scarabs gather lost and forgotten things that are abandoned due to the land itself being in decline. So it would make sense that these creatures didn't start gathering ashes of war or incantations, or the remnants of the minor Erdtrees, until after the Shattering began, and we can look to the Land of Shadow to further drive home this point. The Scarabs in the Land of Shadow serve the same purpose as those in the Lands Between, and again, we see a land that has been in decline for quite some time, longer in fact than the Lands Between. These Scarabs have nothing to scrounge but ashes of war and smithing stones, and if they were serving a master from the Lands Between, they'd have no way of communicating with them, nor delivering whatever it is they gathered. The presence of these creatures in this place screams to me that not only do they not serve Gideon Ofnir, but that they don't serve anyone at all but themselves. Unfortunately, the lore of these bugs is that they are simply bugs. There are no greater mysteries to the Teardrop Scarabs, outside of perhaps where the symbols on their shells originate from. Perhaps they're naturally occurring, as some of these creatures do seem to have the ability to tap into some magical powers, hence the disappearing, growing, and teleporting. Maybe the symbols develop on their backs as they roll their treasures, indicating to other Scarabs what kind of sustenance they're gathering. All this to say that the Scarabs are simply just magical bugs, doing their best to survive in a world post-Shattering, and really thriving based on how much dung there is to feed on. Outside of written lore and theories, I did want to bring up what Scarabs symbolize, as I think it ties well into the Lands Between, and is ultimately why they permeate this golden land. In ancient Egypt, the scarab beetle was seen as a symbol of the divinity of the morning sun. The Egyptian god Khepri was said to roll the sun across the sky every day, which explained the sun rising and setting. It was the scarab's act of rolling dung balls that ancient Egyptians believed was symbolic of the sun's cycle. And so the scarab came to be associated with the cycle of life and the idea of rebirth and regeneration. If we apply this to Elden Ring, the Erdtree performs this cycle as well, feeding on the souls who are given an Erdtree burial and rebirthing them into the world. In this way, the scarabs serve the same purpose in the Lands Between that they did in ancient Egypt. They're a living symbol of the land's religious beliefs. I think this is why so many of these scarabs still roam the Lands Between once our Tarnish reaches this place. I'm willing to bet that hunting and killing these creatures was frowned upon, possibly even blasphemous, as to kill them would be to spit in the face of the Erdtree's cycle. Even though these creatures gathered powerful ashes of war and incantations, no one would dare disturb their work. That is, until we crack open their dung balls and reap their rewards. So that's it. The larger story of these fascinating creatures is that there likely is no larger story to them at all. I don't believe they work for Gideon, as they likely predate him, and with no written lore about them whatsoever, anything we say is merely speculation. I personally believe that their symbolic meaning could be accurate, but unfortunately, there's no official documents confirming or denying this idea. These creatures are not even described in the Elden Ring books of knowledge, unless I'm missing something in there. When it comes to the scarabs, It looks like this is another mystery without an answer, and I think the best way to close out the 200th episode of this series is with a creature we can all speculate about, together. Thank you for sticking with me for 200 episodes of Elden Lore. What are your thoughts on the Teardrop Scarabs? Do you believe they could be linked to Gideon? And if so, how do you reconcile the wildly different eye symbols? Do you believe their existence in the lands between speaks to them being natural residents of this world? Perhaps even found in places like the Land of Reeds? Or are they native to the lands between specifically? How many of these guys have you found in your travels throughout Elden Ring? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Watch that button light up as I say like this video, and if you think we've earned it, please subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden Lore.